In today's video, I'm going to show you how to lay concrete block like these. Let's get it. Now I know there are plenty of videos on YouTube on how to lay blocks like these. A lot of experts, a lot of pros out there that are really good at laying blocks. But what I've found in watching some of the videos is the methods they use are very hard to pick up if you've never laid block, or if you're just starting to lay a few block. So I'm hoping this video will be more beginner friendly. As you can see, there are two different types of blocks. This is an end block, it's smooth on the end. This is what I call a line block or an inline block. It has ears and is not smooth, it has this divot on the end. On the opposite end of the end block you see this groove, and that groove is for laying in around windows. The nailing flange on your window will slide right in there. The other thing I want to point out is there is a thick side. See how thick this is? This block is also thick like that. Now if I spin this around, you'll see how much thinner this side is. The thin side goes down. And an easy way to remember that is when picking up a block, this is thick on this, it's easier to pick up on the thick side. So thick side up, thin side down. And generally speaking, when you buy a block from a block manufacturer, they will come mixed with line block and end block in the same pallet. So this is the mortar mix that I'm using to lay these block with. It's a Mastercraft from Menards. There are two types of mortar mixes. There's type S, and then there's another type that's called type N. Type S is for structural use. As you look down here, it says load-bearing structures. Type N would be for non-structural use. The best way to mix this mortar is with a mortar mixer, of course, but I don't have one, and this isn't a really big job, so I'm just using a drill and a paddle mixer. Put it on low. You don't need to mix this stuff real fast. And then I have one bucket for washing off the paddle mixer and any mortar tools. I have a bucket of clean water, and then my mixing bucket. To start, I'll put about 2 scoops of water in my mixing bucket. Then I'll add about half of a bag of mortar mix. And mix it. Then I'll add water as needed to get it to the right consistency. Alright, that looks about right. An easy way to tell if your mortar is the right consistency is to grab a big trowel full of mortar, smack it real good, and then turn it upside down. If it sticks to the trowel, it's usually within the range of the correct consistency. Too thick or too thin, and it'll slide right off. Now I'll take my bucket of mortar, dump it on my mud board. So what I'll do is just smooth out a little spot in my mortar and grab me about that much mortar on the edge of my trowel. I'll bring it around. I'm going to start at this corner, so I'll just lay it right on top of the block, just like that. Grab another one and lay it next to it. One for the end, one for this side, and the final one. Okay, now I'm ready to set my block in place. And since this is a corner, I'm obviously going to use a corner block. So I'll grab the block by both ends like this and lower it down onto the mortar, paying attention to the outside of the wall and trying to keep it even, and just kind of letting it set on the mortar. You see it'll squish out a little bit. Then I'll grab my trowel and I'll get the first little bit of excess off. Now if the mortar is perfect, I can take this trowel and tap it right into place. And if the mortar is a little bit thicker, I like to use a plastic hammer to tap the block into place. It seems to be easier. First thing I want to do is just level the block both ways. Looks pretty good. Then I want to make sure my block is level up from the other block. So I'll set my 4-foot level against it and tap it in until I'm level. Same with the end here. Okay, I'm level. So now I need to lower the block down until the top of this block is exactly 8 inches from the top of the previous row. Okay, it's 8 inches on this end. And then I'll just level across and bring the other end down to that. And then level this way. Make sure it's level. So when it's done, we should be 8 inches up, level all ways, and then double check level on the outside, make sure my corner is going straight up. And then the final thing I'll do is hold my 4-foot level on the outside of the block and just make sure it is running straight with the rest of the block. Now that the block is set, I'll scrape off any excess mortar, put it back on my board. The next block I want to lay is this one here, so I can lay another block and keep laying up my corner. The reason I want to lay up my corner first is I want to lay it up and let it set up a little bit before I tie a string to it for my line block. If I were to tie a string to this block right now where it's just been laid, I run the risk of moving this block. Same process for this second block. I lay my mortar on top of the previous block. Since this block is meeting up with that block, I'll have to dress these ears before I lay it. And to dress the ears is pretty much the same as laying mortar on the previous block. I just lay some mortar on it. If I were just to pick this up, the ears would most likely fall off. Once I have the mud on this block, I'll give this block about 5 taps. This helps this mud set onto the end of the block. So when I pick it up to lay it, the mud will not fall off the ends. And I'll set it in place, pushing in and down at the same time. Then I'll set my 4-foot level on the outside, and I want to tap this down until the level makes contact with the corner block. And then tap this end, making sure that it's perfectly level. Then I'll level the other way. Okay. Now I'll set my level on the outside, make sure it's setting straight with this block and the rest of the blocks. So I want to make sure this block is setting a 3/8 inch off of this block. And to do that, I'll measure, I'm about a 7/16. So I'll need to tap the block that way. To prevent this block from moving, I'll squeeze with my hands here, and as I gently tap on the block. Okay, here we go. So now that I have these 2 blocks laid, I want to lay another corner block. This time the block will come in this way as every other block comes out to the corner, giving it an overlap going up through. That's basically 2 rows of corner laid up. Typically I would do 4 or 5, maybe 6 rows, but I'm putting rebar after this row of blocks, so I can't lay up any more corner until I lay my line blocks in there. Then I want to lay another row of rebar. On a warm day, this mortar will dry out pretty quick on the board, and since I'm not really fast, I'll keep a bucket of water with me and just put a little dab on there and work it in. As I'm getting ready to use it, I'll just do one section here, get it the right consistency. So on the end of a wall like this, every other row will be a half block. Since these blocks are really small, I like to lay the full block first and then lay this block into it. And the reason for that is if I'm laying this full block and I'm squishing the joint, it's much easier to move this block around than it is a full block. So what I'll do is I'll mark in 8 inches. And I'll lay this block first right to that line. That way I know this little half block will fit right in there. So now I'm ready to lay the line block or the block in between. And to keep them straight, I'll run a string from that corner to this corner. So this little block hooks on the end of the block or on the corner, and it'll hold the string on the corner of that block. I got my string clamped on the other end. To figure out exactly where I want the block on the string, I'll pull the string super tight and then I'll hold my block at wherever I want it on the string. I'll let up the slack, and then to fasten the string to the block is I pinch it on this end, I lay it beside the groove, wrap it underneath, bring it up, lay that in the groove, and then drop this line into the groove, which is then laying on top of the other one, and it'll hold I can pull on that and it's not going to come out of the block. Then I'll just take my block, hook it on the end of the concrete block, raise it up to where it's right at the very corner of the block, and I'm ready to lay. So to lay a line block, I use this string as my guide. Just bring the block in, set it in place, and lower it down until it's about an 1/8 inch above the string, and it should stay right there. And the first thing I'll do is check my distance from the other block. I need this distance to be a 3/8 inch. If it's not, I'll tap on the end and bring it in till it's a 3/8 inch. This one's perfect, so now I just need to drop it down in place. And I'll tap it down to my string is at the very corner of this. I don't want this block pushing on the string. I want a slight gap, just so as I lay each block, I'm not pushing the string out as I go. And then while I'm checking level this way, I'll drop the block down using my string to check the level that way. I'll scrape off my excess mortar, put it back on the mortar board. And that block's done. So it's very important that the spacing on the blocks stays consistent all the way down through. Instead of measuring each one and making sure each is a 3/8, I'll hook a tape measure on this block and I'll set a little weight on it so it stays hooked up. And then as I go down through, I'll stretch this tape measure out. And if you see where that 16 inches is, that's where the end of the next block will be. And then at 32 inches and at 48 inches all the way down through there. So in my line blocks, once I get the first one done, my tape measure's ready, my hammer and my levels there, what I'll do is once the block's set, I'll bring the tape measure across, set it in the middle. First thing I'll do is make sure the block is where it needs to be endways. I'll set my level on it, I'll tap it down into place. And that block's done. Once I get down to my last 3 or 4 blocks, I like to measure and make sure my gap is right so that my last mud joint isn't thick or thin. So the distance in between the blocks should come out to 16-inch increments plus a 3/8 inch. So as you can see, pretty much dead on. So on this last block, I'll dress the ears like normal, but I'll keep it a little bit shallower because I need to squeeze down between the two. And now I need to fill my last joint full of mortar. The quickest way of doing it is just taking a trowel and smearing some mud in it and just trying to get a good facing on it. But I like to use a tuck joiner and just drop some mud down in and pack it in. It's a lot more time consuming, but it gets the mortar out into these grooves and I feel like it makes the joint stronger. So once the blocks have been laid for about 30-45 minutes, depending on the weather, I'll come through with my striker and I'll dress up the joints.